Hello, so our third speaker is Dr. Biung Ismahasan, and Biung is an Indigenous Kulin Nation curator, artist, and researcher. He received a PhD in curating at the University of Essex. His research involves issues of Indigenous curatorial practice and decolonial aesthetics, focusing on the curation of Taiwanese Indigenous contemporary art and building on the themes of articulation of performative indigeneity and Indigenous creative sovereignty. Biung, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you for being here.
I'm sorry, okay. Hello everyone, my name is Biung Ismahasan. Uninaga mihumisan sakin hai Biung Ismahasan dagi saki sha Taiwan to dagaujin to namasha do bunun. I spoke my Bunun languages. My name is Biung Ismahasan. I came from the Kanua community in Namasha in southern part of Taiwan. I'm staying with my ancestor in this space to share the beauties of our culture and art. On the behalf of the Taiwanese indigenous people, it is greatest honors to share my forthcoming exhibition, Resurgence and Solidarity, Indigenous Taiwanese Woman Art, just happened this coming Saturday at Taiwan Indigenous People Cultural Part. And it is also my honor to have to collaborate with the British Council and the border crossings origin, the Festival of First Nation in London for the digital curation. At the core of this exhibition is the need for women's togetherness, the togetherness as the life practice and togetherness as a methodology, whether that be curatorial approach or personal philosophy. Decolonizing Indigenous Taiwanese contemporary art must include privileging the voices and input of Indigenous women's artists. By bringing together the voices of respected elders and three very powerful women artists, as you can see in this slide, this exhibition generates togetherness through trans-Indigenous culture exchanges across generations. It is about the transmissions of knowledge between people, land, and the river. Taiwanese indigenous people and group, currently the 16 official recognized indigenous people are this, and I belong to Bunun, Ataya, and Ganaganavu Nation. And at the core of my approach is indigenous curatorial practice, which has served as a principal means for responding to Bunun ontological relationship with Maluskun Masdala. The Bunun concept of coexistence, which means land, which also means humility and fear towards earth, and like in many First Nation cultures, the possess a grounded relationship both culturally and spiritually. And visualizing sovereignty in an indigenous sense is similarly connecting to land. In my Burun language is Dala. In my practice-based research, the word sovereignty, appropriate from English languages, those become the critical source of self-determination for indigenous people globally, and has been used as corrective strategies by indigenous people to counter the ongoing dispossession of our sources and land. In the Bunun context, the phrase Maluskun Dalas can be defined as absolutely sovereignty. Today, the right of the woman, the production of elders, the environmental concern are critical for many indigenous Taiwanese women. There is a powerful sense of their search for new unexplored possibility as they strive to carve out a place for themselves and escape or departures from the familiar and the constraint of the COVID-19 pandemic, They deliberately located themselves in the foreign or allied environment with and with an awareness of their differences, finding connection, experimenting with intensity. The artists in this exhibition, all of whom identified as feminists, make these journals from the specific starting point of the Native community experience and their sovereign word and concern about environmental reciprocity. At the core of this exhibition is the need for women togetherness, because we need to unite it. Women have long been the driven creative force behind indigenous Taiwanese art, yet their individual contribution has been largely unrecognized. The treaties as autonomous representation of entire culture. The working through togetherness, this exhibition aims to gather the physical experience and life story of women artists to share their viewpoint in creative ways, to throw new light on criminal concern and to discuss new concern in ways informed by contradiction. In the global space of disorder, decline, obscurity, and alienation, it initiated an alternative culture of way of the being together. As you can see, the first artist is Milay Mavaliw, belong to a Katatipu community of Taidong County in the eastern Taiwan. In Katatipu community, where Milay grew up, the story of each year represents the passage through life, the sowing and harvest festival that follow the growth of the millet, the vernal sacrifice that accompanies the disappearances of life, recording the growth and the passing of life year after year. And looking back on yourself, the clue of the memory that comes slowly through your hand, the living, the try for the city, studying the foreign country in Japan and the land environment, the wandering on land where there is nothing. As indigenous curators, I have the clear interest in ensuring that my Kyoto approach departs from ethnography mode of display. As such, I ask, what is the nature of ethno-accepted? What can it tell us about ourselves as natives? Those I have an interest in unveiling the connection leading back to Taiwanese indigenous people and contemporary art in order to echo the major components of interaction of artistic collaboration and conversation associated with indigenous environmental values in the variety of indigenous to indigenous relationship. I maintain an indigenous essentialism as a counterpart to stretch the production of the knowledge about the Kyoto decoloniality. As established curators of the First Nation from Canada, Wanda Nanabesh asserts, world-like return, resurging, and rewriting old have embedded in them a colonial idea of time where we have not had continuity and contemporaneity or even modernity, even if otherwise than as European vision. Resurgence and solidarity indigenous Taiwanese woman arts exhibition connect any process of decolonization of indigenous curatorial practice to question what the place of accepted in the colonial method of power, a machine that generates injustice, develops silence at all levels by articulated performative euthanasia and visualizing sovereignty of an indigenous land, the female activism, and their body resistant culture and community. Anchored in this idea, Ali Sapa, which means a rugged rock cliff in the Lukai nation, dominated by Eleng Luluan. This word built on things of indigenous way of knowing and address the key concept of relatedness, continuing, continuity, and activation. And relatedness is the notion that all things on the earth are our relation, a fundamental idea to indigenous worldview. That continuity is relatedness across generation, history, and our future. And this would depict the path along with Eleng Luluan have returned to the old Kuchapuan community in recent years, and she feel recalled. She drived the deepest thought of her heart to go home. She evoked her Luka ancestor rooted in his land. During the Typhoon Miracle in August 2009, the new Kuchapuan community once again experienced catastrophes as their tribal landscape were destroyed. After the landslide on the mountain, the Lukai people tried to return to old Kuchapuan. The road was blotted, and so they have to open another path. The destroyed road is still there. After the typhoon, it gave life. And this word presented Luluan returned to old Kuchapuan, both the physical and emotional experience, crying in response to the face of the earth, unheard petitioners climbed to the peak. Another word is Luluan inner word, looked like a recycling factory and assembly line. She has been the West collectors, exploring the trajectories of her life. Each time she moved or immigrated, the border crossing and encounters, she took her stuff, found cardboard boxes carefully and checked them during the process. She realized that each of her personal decisions in the past would be viewed like a ritual as destined were to be moved from old Kuchapuan and old Medest to a new one where she lived in the community of Dulan in the eastern part of Taiwan. And that elevation is about the present and how an indigenous artist intimated a space, an object, or an idea through sensational experience, video, or viewer engagement. Taiwanese indigenous Lukai Nation artist Eleng Luluan, she believed in the ability of an installation to have its own languages, an own way of leading us something new. Ocean waves rose out of the Luluan inner world and consciousness and facing the chaotic situation against COVID-19 pandemic. I think there is one thing that everyone in this online room and platform will really stand by its need for that togetherness. The togetherness is a practice, togetherness is a methodology. So bring together of the very feature of the curatorial group is about curating togetherness. Finally, I would say togetherness is actually the fundamental core values of the being indigenous curators. And finally, the third artist, Aluaiy Kaumakan, belong to the Taiwan Nation from Dasha community of the Pingtung County in the southern part of Taiwan. And this word, through the rubbling, a right hand touches the material itself. In the process of ink rolling and printing, both eyes must pay attention to the relationship between the material and the paper at the same time. This kind of relationship is like her life, always paying attention to her Taiwan noble identity, cultural survival and values at the same time. This is the diverse and the multitasking extent, and it's always quite difficult. And Robin carried the definition of her life and returned to the original hometown, the Pararangan community, which is her hometown and her cultural heritage and all her childhood memory. After the Typhoon Miracle in August 2009, we were not allowed to return back to our original community. It is impossible for us to tear it down and take it down the mountain. So what can we do? By rubbling the latent that trace be produced through her hand and brought down the mountain and put into the world, it made be a more contextual creative thinking. And another word is the tribal landscape, which Aluaiy Kaumakan tried to reveal and to reveal a landscape of her original community. And final word is, this is the documentary installation which collaborate with me. And this word represents the creative work of Aluaiy Kaumakan from the Paiwan Nation. At the core of this installation is indigenous weaving technique, which is a deep conceptual underpinning, which has served as the principal means for responding to Paiwan Nation relationship with the melodic good. The Paiwan concept of the textual winding, which also means humanity and activation and feel toward inner spirituality and possess a grounded connectivity, both culturally and spirituality. This way of understanding of the self in relation to land, spirit, and common to many indigenous First Nation culture. And the installation depicts the cultural influences and trans-contextual dialogue of the Melaligat and its evaluation with Kaumakan word based on her multiple identity. And finally, this word attempt to explore the artistic process, assumption, shift, and expansion from the creation of the personal experience, life memory, and the cultural change. It asks how time and history may be compressed and condensed in the spatial mode of woman united through the life experience in the generate bodies. The question about disappearance of class and culture, the woman right to speak, and environmental care are of the vital importance to many female artists. They are familiar with trauma, and their art offer at once a response and an escape. And this exhibition have four sub-themes: environmental reciprocity, cultural landscape to turn after healing, and the power of object. And this exhibition interrogates these themes through their careful, the deep exploration through art, offering a new perspective through the activation of female artistic united. Thank you for your listening.
Now I have a question from Lisa Ravna Finnborg. Thank you, Lisa, for being part of the webinar. This question is for Biung, and is creating from an indigenous perspective, what would you say is important to keep in mind that separates the process from one centered within a known indigenous context?
Thank you, Lisa, for your question. And I know Lisa is a Summit artist, a Summit curators from based in Oslo, and she is the co-curators for Summit Pavilion for Nas Venice Biennale last years. And as my role of the indigenous curators, I think it is to ensure that we bridge attitudinal and knowledge-based gulf between indigenous and non-indigenous in culture appropriate and generates waste. And one way of confronting my own responsibility as indigenous curators is to establish the separatists, which I mean indigenous sovereign spaces for the presentation of indigenous contemporary art. Why I would like to say that normally, especially in Taiwan, there's a lot of non-indigenous scholars forgot to respect our land before opening the exhibition. And for extent, I'm the Bunun Nation. I collaborate with 3 different nation artists, Binumayan and Lukai and the Paiwan Nation. Firstly, my strategies is, my approach is to meet their elders and to meet their family members in order to connect together, because this is my own experience. And a large part of my curation aspire to create a detailed localized art history and naturalize the idea to create the culturally relation space and of indigeneity. And I think the connectivity and the togetherness of connect between the curators and artists, this will influences your atmospheres of your curatorial space and curatorial practice. I think this is very important as indigenous curators. You need to bring, you need to take the responsibility and do the action to say our word. For example, my first comment exhibition this Saturday, and I'm going to present our sovereign word of Taiwanese indigenous artists to the world, because the women voices, just like the drop of waters, and the voices of the group of the women can be condensed into the power of the river, and the river is connecting to our First Nation culture. Thank you.